This is a list of all the ruling monarchs in Russian history. It starts with Prince Rurik of Novgorod, a semi-legendary figure from the mid-9th century, and ends with Nicholas II, who gave up the throne in 1917 and was executed with his family in 1918. Russia has been ruled by two main dynasties, the Rurikids, 862–1598, and the Romanovs, from 1613. The vast land known as Russia has seen many rulers since the 9th century, from Kievan Rus' to the Grand Principality of Vladimir, the Grand Principality of Moscow, the Tsardom of Russia, and the Russian Empire. The titles used by these rulers have evolved over time. Early titles like Knyaz, Prince, and Veliki Knyaz, Grand Prince, were sometimes translated as Duke and Grand Duke in Western writings. Later, the title of Tsar, meaning Caesar, was used and debated to be equal to either king or emperor. Finally, the title of emperor was adopted. As per Article 59 of the 1906 Russian Constitution, the Russian emperor held many titles, each representing a region under their control. In traditional historiography, the first Russian monarch is considered to be the semi-legendary Rurik, the first prince of Novgorod. Rurik's successor, Oleg, moved the capital to Kiev, establishing what is now known as Kievan Rus, or Ancient Rus. Over the next few centuries, the most significant titles were the Grand Prince of Kiev and the Prince of Novgorod. The holder of these titles, often the same person, could assert dominance over the region. The gradual breakup of Kievan Rus began in the 11th century, after the death of Yaroslav the Wise. The power of the Grand Prince weakened as regional clans gained influence. In 1097, the Council of Lubeck formalized the feudal nature of the land, creating a federative structure where different principalities were still tied to Kiev as the state center. This structure allowed some principalities to develop into semi-independent regions, leading to increased conflicts between them in the 12th century. After Mstislav's death in 1132, Kievan Rus entered a period of recession and rapid decline, marking the end of its unity. The throne of Kiev became a battleground for various groups of Rurikid princes. Despite Kiev losing much of its former glory and power, these struggles continued for decades. In March 1169, a coalition of princes led by Andrei Bogolyubsky, the Grand Prince of Vladimir, sacked Kiev and forced the ruling prince, Mstislav II, to flee to Volhynia. Andrei appointed his brother Gleb as the Prince of Kiev, while he continued to rule from Vladimir on the Klyazma. Andrei took the title of Grand Prince of Vladimir, even though the Prince of Kiev still held the title of Grand Prince. By the 12th century, the Grand Principality of Vladimir became the most powerful region in the northeast, rivaling Novgorod and Kiev. In 1169, Andrei I's son attacked and sacked Kiev, but Andrei chose to stay in Vladimir and made it his capital. He took the title of Grand Prince to assert his dominance, shifting political power to the northeast. After the Mongol invasions, the Russian principalities began paying tribute to the Golden Horde, known as the Tatar yoke. Russian princes had to get permission, called a yarlik, from the Khan to rule. This Mongol domination of Russia continued until around 1480, when it formally ended. After Alexander Nevsky's death, the Grand Principality of Vladimir split into smaller principalities. Alexander's youngest son, Daniel, became the first permanent ruler of Moscow. The Golden Horde gave the title of Grand Prince to various appanage princes, but they lived and ruled in their own regions. By the end of the century, only Moscow, Tver, and Nizhny Novgorod competed for the title. Eventually, Daniel's Moscow branch of the Rurikids secured it. Ivan further strengthened Moscow by collecting tribute for the Golden Horde, increasing the city's wealth, and buying land from bankrupt princes. He convinced the head of the Russian Orthodox Church to move to Moscow, solidifying its power. Ivan's son, Simeon, was the first to use the title Grand Prince of Moscow and Vladimir. After Ivan II's death, a struggle for the title ensued. Ivan's son, Dmitry Ivanovich, later known as Dmitry Donskoy, took the throne in 1363. The Battle of Kulikovo in 1380 marked Moscow's dominance among the Russian principalities. After Dmitry Donskoy's death, the throne of Vladimir was given to the Prince of Moscow, taking away the Khan's right to appoint the Grand Prince. The Grand Princes of Moscow then took the title, Sovereign and Grand Prince of all Russia. As Moscow united with other principalities, the Grand Prince's role grew to be seen as the ruler of all Russia. Grand Princes of Moscow. The Russians began to assert their independence from the Mongols when Ivan III stopped paying tribute, effectively declaring freedom from their control. Ivan III also expanded his territory by annexing other principalities. His son, Vasily III, finished uniting all of Russia by the 1520s. In medieval Russia, the eldest son usually succeeded his father as prince. The Grand Princes of Moscow strengthened their position by leaving wills that named their eldest sons as heirs. This was slightly different from traditional succession practices. In 1497, Ivan III crowned his grandson Dmitry as co-ruler, bypassing his son Vasily, but eventually, Vasily became co-ruler. Ivan III also started using the title of Tsar in foreign correspondence, but his grandson, Ivan IV, was the first to be officially crowned as Tsar. In 1547, Ivan the Terrible took on the title of Tsar. During his reign, Ivan IV did something unusual in 1575 by transferring his powers to Simeon Bekbulatovich, a Tatar prince who had converted to Christianity and received his own principality. Ivan resumed the throne the next year. Ivan was followed by his only surviving son, Fyodor, in 1584. When Fyodor died without a child, it marked the end of the Rurik dynasty. In 1581, Ivan the Terrible tragically killed his eldest son, Ivan Ivanovich, in anger, leaving only Fyodor the Furtin to inherit the throne. When Fyodor died without children, the Rurik dynasty ended, leading to a succession crisis during a troubled time known as the Time of Troubles. Boris Godunov, Fyodor's brother-in-law and regent, was elected as the first non-Rurikid Tsar by the Zemsky Sobor, feudal parliament. Boris Godunov's rule was troubled by famine, leading to chaos. False Dmitris claimed to be Fyodor III's lost brother, with only the first impostor seizing the throne. Vasily Shuisky, a distant Rurikid cousin, also briefly ruled. Foreign powers, including the Vasa monarchs of Sweden and Poland-Lithuania, intervened in Russian politics. The Time of Troubles ended in 1613, with Michael Romanov's election as Tsar, starting the Romanov dynasty. Michael was succeeded by his son, Alexis, who was followed by his eldest son from his first marriage, Fyodor. When Fyodor died, the throne was contested by his 15-year-old brother Ivan and his 9-year-old half-brother Peter. Each had support from rival clans, the Miloslavskis and Narishkins. Initially, Peter was chosen, but after a Moscow uprising, a compromise made Peter and Ivan co-tsars in 1682, with their older sister Sophia as regent. Ivan was considered senior, but Peter took over in 1689 after removing Sophia with the help of another uprising. Peter became the sole monarch upon Ivan's death in 1696. Peter the Great declared the Russian Empire in 1721 after winning the Great Northern War. This upgraded Russia's status from a tsardom to an empire. The full title given to Peter was Father of the Fatherland, Peter the Great, All-Russian Emperor. He initially held the title of Great Lord Tsar and Grand Prince, autocrat of Great, Small, and White Russia, when he became the sole ruler in 1696, following his father Alexis. By 1710, he started using Tsar and All-Russian Emperor, but it wasn't until 1721 that the imperial title became official. The term All-Russian also included territories like modern Belarus and Ukraine. In 1722, Peter decreed that the sovereign could choose their successor, citing examples like Ivan III appointing his grandson. This idea was further defended in a political treatise after Peter's death, arguing that rulers had the right to pick successors, not just follow family rules. Peter died in 1725 without naming a successor. The Romanov dynasty officially ruled Russia until the Russian Revolution in 1917. After Peter the Great's direct male descendants ended in 1730, the throne passed through various hands, including Anna, Elizabeth, and Catherine the Great. Catherine's son, Paul I, established clear rules of inheritance, which governed the imperial throne until the Russian Empire fell in 1917. The claim of Kirill Vladimirovich and his heirs to the Russian imperial throne has been questioned since his marriage to Princess Victoria Melita of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Paul I's rules in the Act of Succession of 1797 were not perfectly clear, leading to different interpretations. Russia currently lacks a clear contender for the throne, which has been vacant for over 100 years. In 1915, Nicholas II allowed Kirill Vladimirovich's descendants to keep their personal rights, similar to Alexander II's practice after his non-royal marriages. Kirill's descendants were not considered morganatic and retained their titles as Grand Dukes.